Welcome back for season 2 of Everyday Business Solutions. My name is Haley Morris. I'm your podcast coordinator and host. Our podcast aims to bring the expertise of business professionals straight to your ears. And for this season, we're going to be talking about important connections and how you can utilize them to elevate your career to the next level. If that's something that you're interested in, just keep listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Business Solutions. My name is Haley Morris. I'm your podcast coordinator and host, and welcome to season 2 of our show. Today, I have with me Warren Berry, and he's going to tell you a bit about what he does and his own podcast, which is really incredible, actually. So if you don't mind, Warren.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Haley. I really appreciate the time and having my own podcast. I appreciate all the work and effort that goes into the work that, to make this all happen. So thank you very much for having me as a guest.
Thank you for coming on. I'm super excited to dive into our episode, but I do want everybody to hear more about what you do specifically because it's been super fun to learn about it for myself.
Yeah, so my company is called Instinctive Solutions, and I use a tool called Kolbe, Kolbe, and the tool itself measures what's called the connotative aspect of the mind. So don't get that mistaken with the cognitive. So the connotative aspect of the mind is your instincts. It is your natural drive. It's your innate way of doing things. So it is your problem-solving strategy. And so the work that I do is working with individuals, of course, on coaching and whatnot. But I work with companies and organizations to help them really build solid, dynamic teams. And we make sure that when we align people, that we're aligning them with the jobs they do best, that are natural to them. We align them to how they can communicate with others better. And then when we're building teams or projects, of how do you align those people to make sure that we get the best out of those people and for what they do naturally. So it's not really a forced effort. And then one other things I'm working on right now, I'm doing research on connotative stress and chronic pain. So my belief is that people will, that if they're up against themselves, whether in their job, in their whatever their environment may be, and of course with COVID, we're dealing with a whole different spectrum of a changed environment. But people will make a choice, and they'll make a cognitive choice. And they'll say, you know what, this isn't working for me, and I'm going to leave, and I got to do something different because I know this isn't working. Or their body will take them out, and they'll get sick, and basically they'll go on stress leave and all those kind of things like that. So that's the research that I'm doing right now, to be able to, again, hopefully we can help people so they don't get to that point, and then they can be successful in their careers.
So you are absolutely like the most perfect guest we could have on at this point in the show because we are coming off of probably one of the most stressful times in the last several years. And we are also seeing shifts in work environments that are both reflective of the unique remote situations and economic stresses that we've seen, but also just a natural order of we're starting to see that destabilization of the pyramid format within business. We're starting to see things become more flat and more emphasis on the team unit, which for our continuous connections theme for season 2 is the perfect place to start. And it's that team, because I think most of us right now, unless we're independent contractors or we're in a smaller business unit, we're probably, even then, probably working very heavily in a team. And so I really wanted to dive in with you and talk about how we play a role as an individual in the team, and then how we look at the formation of the team as a whole so that we're actually maximizing potential and that we're not leaving somebody off or putting undue stress on another person. So what is your take on what you've seen for the team units over the last couple months in particular?
Well, I mean, definitely with the shift, obviously with COVID, and for people having to go remote, there has been such a massive shift in that team because people they're not in the boardroom anymore. They're not having the water cooler talk like they used to. They're not collaborating in somebody's office and brainstorming and coming up with the new ideas. So we're seeing that everybody's sort of divided, not divided per se, but divided, from a personal perspective, where everybody's now working via Zoom. And that has had, I've seen a really huge shift, not only from Zoom fatigue, but for how people have had to work. And so from a team perspective, that, you know, that because of that sort of division where we're not pulling people together, you're not feeling that energy. And again, even that water cooler talk, which I think, it used to be looked at as wasting time, but really it was actually a great place for people to collaborate. And, somebody can throw out an idea and then other people can run with it. And I think that's a really big shift that I've seen occur, especially since, the March, April when things got shut down.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at situations like that, like the water cooler talk or just the casual chats in between cubicles and stuff in the office, they helped relieve stress. They helped break monotony and do a lot of things like that mentally that was just needed. And then, like you said, it was this impromptu round table where sometimes you came away with an idea or an actionable thing, or you remembered something you needed to get done. So the fact that we don't have those anymore can be very strenuous. And I know I had a coworker that when I was like, "Oh, I'm going remote again because, we need to be safe and this is just a precaution that's the natural next step again." I was like, "Don't forget, like, let's chat on Teams or let's have a Zoom call that I want to keep seeing your face." And she's like, "Oh, I hate that." And she's one of those people I've seen over the last couple months, like the 5 or 6 of us that are actually in the office. And so people don't like it. People don't like the Zoom, and it can be stressful because now the physical divide has become like a team divide too.
hmm And one of the things that I've been talking to a fair amount of people now, I don't, we'll see if some of your listeners can appreciate this, but there's some people, that are on the team, that do not like structure. Believe it or not, there's people that don't like. I am one of those people. I'm not a structured fan. So I'm not a person who likes to work by the hour or to put things into a sequence where there's structure around. For me, my world is take all the fences off, let me loose, let me multitask, let me do it all at once, and I can shuck and jive, and I'll get where I need to go. I'm just gonna have a really squiggly line to get there, so I don't live by the by the straight line. But what we've seen, interesting enough, and then talk about the stress piece, is that when we look at, with everything through Zoom, right? How has it been done? Well, I have an appointment at 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 11:30, right? And they've been placed in this world of structure, which I found has been really, really stressful for them. And you'd think that, well, isn't much easier, and it's actually for them, it's not. It's actually a bit of a nightmare. And when people are put up against themselves like that, they're not at their best. They're not productive. They're not efficient, and their work quality actually decreases. So they're not really contributing to the team to the best of their ability, and it's not for a lack of effort. They're putting in the effort, they're putting in the time, but their mental energy just isn't there to give. And so, we were having to figure out strategies and whatnot for those people where back when they were in the office, if you think about it, you didn't run hourly meetings in the office all day, every day, ever. And they're having to now. So it's been a really, really big shift. And so definitely from the individual side, but also that is also having an effect on the team.
Oh, well, and I know I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, "Hey, can we just jump on a call? Like, I just want to talk to you real quick." And they're like, "Oh, we'll put it on my calendar for tomorrow." I was like, "I don't really want to." Like, that's the problem because even when we're at home, that's always like, even if you're not doing something in that moment where normally you would have stopped and taken a moment to talk to them beside your desk or whatever else, now it's just throw it on my calendar for like 15, 20 minutes or
Mhm.
whatever. And it's like you said, it becomes a meeting on the calendar. And before, the only time you had meeting after meeting after meeting lined up was when you couldn't help it. And now it's those casual conversations are meetings and they're conflicting with like for me booking with guests and talking with various people and partners and customer of ours that we could bring onto the show or work with for other productions. It's okay, well now my team members are that same level of stress and that's hard to cope with, especially when you're at home and you've got who knows what dog crawling all over you and what kid at your feet who made a fort out of your table and everything else. So and that was me the last couple of days.
Yeah, and again, with, I can just speak from my own, my own personal experience of, just being sitting in four walls. I've never worked in a cubicle. I never will work in a cubicle. Bless the hearts of the people that do. But really working, I was working from home originally, and being in my four walls in my office, and I would work for so long, and I was starting to crawl. I was really starting to crawl the walls. I was like, I got to get out of here. I can't do this. And it's just, we talked to you earlier before we got on this, and we were talking about mental health and those kind of pieces. And I think it's just really vitally important that people have the freedom to be themselves. We can't, the environment's changed, right? We have no control over our environment, right? But what we do have control over is our reaction to the environment. And when it comes in, so we're seeing some of these mental health pieces. And again, from my own experiences, like I had to get out of the house, I had to get away. And so I'd hop in my car. Now it's winter, so it's not really as easy. But in the summertime, I'd hop in my car and I would drive for an hour just to get out of there, and then kind of reset myself and then really come back in again. And as we led to earlier, saying about people being on the, on that structured side on the Zoom call, and yeah, let's have a meeting, right? Not an impromptu, hey, let's hang out and chat. It's now become a meeting, which changes, in my opinion, changes the whole energy of everything. And so we're not having that opportunity for that impromptu, or I'm going to get away and go for a walk at lunch, or I'm going to it's because we're sort of got into this whole structured piece of working that may work really well for some, and I've seen that, and maybe not so well for others.
I've definitely seen the people who enjoy that structure a little bit more. I'm across, like I need some kind of structure. I do have to schedule my calls, or the introverted part of me rears my head and says, we can't talk right now. Uh, but when it comes to people I know and team members and just the way I work, I'm like you, I can't do that rigid, hard to find. I mean, I literally work a 9 to 5 right now because that's the hours that make sense. And I'm like, I dislike it so much sometimes, but it's you can't track and make sure that you are actually putting in the amount of effort otherwise and stuff like that, especially from a supervisor's perspective. It's nice to have those scheduled hours. It's just having the scheduled hours and then doing it from home, and everything's a Zoom call and everything's a big production, versus just casually getting in the office and being able to buckle down and work for the day. It's so much different.
Hmm. So that's you bring up an interesting point, and I'll kind of, I saw you hate to question the podcaster, but but you made a great point. You're saying, that you're having to work the 9 to 5 because you have to, and the supervisor wants the structure, and you want to be able to measure, and I understand that piece. But
Mhm.
you said yourself, but I don't like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's a piece of you that doesn't like that. And it's not that you don't like your work. Of course you love your work and you're very good at what you do. But that inner, so when you think about, there's that inner piece of you that's talking to you that says, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel right. That's that instinctive, connotative aspect of the mind that's talking to you. And that's the piece I want to get with your listeners to kind of get across, is that that's the piece I want people to listen to. Because instinct, number one, your instincts don't change, number one. And number two, it's subconscious. So they're actually talking to you. And I was telling you earlier, I just wrote an ebook yesterday and talk about, transition stress and those kind of things, right? But the thing is that we tend to should on ourselves. And so, well, I should be like this because I have to. And, I always tell people, don't should on yourself. And you need to, sometimes we have to shift gears and move with what is, but we can't sustain it over time if it's not working well. So you have to give yourself that freedom. You have to listen to it, and acknowledge and honor it, because that is who you are. And so when you get to that 9 to 5, hour by hour, right, and you're feeling that pull, right, listen to it because it's talking to you, and yeah, I think you have to honor it.
Hmm. Yeah, for a while I'd started to figure out ways to break it up and shift things around so that it wasn't so I come into work at this time, I work, and then I leave at this time. Because then it's that on off switch, which can be really good to separate yourself from work, but can be really bad when it's such like for me, it's such a has to be a hard on, or it doesn't feel like it turns on. Like if I don't get a good start to the day, I can kind of drag my feet. And it's not that I don't have the energy, it's that I didn't quite get into. So it's very interesting, but I'm very curious from your side as well, just talking about what all of these things, like these struggles that we're having as being part of a team and how it ties in. What do we do then to kind of bring us back to that team, to start rebuilding and strengthening that team, or building it up from the first time if maybe we didn't leave the office on the best foot? So,
Yeah, I think, when we come back to that whole team piece, I think that, we have to, number one, we have to understand ourselves first. So that's the most, I think to me, that's the number one thing. We also have to understand the people around us, and how they work. So when we're looking at, even right now, let's say from a team perspective, let's say in your company, you're going to come up, the marketing team is going to get together, right? Is to pull those people together. Of course, it's going to be on Zoom. We don't have a choice there, right? But to sometimes just take the time to brainstorm, right? Like take the structure away and just let loose and start to brainstorm, um, and to have that time and have some fun with it, and leverage it. Then people can sort of work together and then turn around and go back home and then work individually and then bring it back together and work individually. So you're not feeling like it's such a box, but you get to actually play with it. And then there's other parts where there's other people on the team who are, let's say, are the like yourself, you talk about your algebra and the number crunching, right? But it's to, again, but it's to throw that back and say, hey, I've been thinking about this. What do you think about that? And then try to leverage those things. And I think to be able to, not just structure where the whole team gets together a lot of the time, is to make it into smaller bites and smaller chunks so that we're getting the integration, right? And then we can sort of bring it back as a whole at the end, or whether that be once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, however the organization works.
mhm, tying together. I know the one thing, we have our marketing team meetings, which actually ends up being our marketing team and plus everybody else who has influence on the marketing or might be on the receiving end of the marketing efforts. So we pull in a larger group for it. And one thing I want to start doing now is just seeing how can we bring us together as a team where we have those ideas that come forward, but that we can just kind of goof off and be ourselves too. Because I love our team. We're kind of cool. We have one guy in Texas actually, and I'm in Ohio right now, so that's kind of cool to have somebody so far. And then everybody else is sort of local, pretty close to this office. Um, but some of us are super nerdy. The others just super nerdy in a different way. And then
Right.
when we get together as a team, it's literally like the funniest little sitcom you've ever seen. Uh, so we've talked a lot more in our marketing chats and things like that have helped, but it can be stressful because then the last couple of days I was like, oh, I haven't talked to anybody from the team. And it kind of bums me out because even though I'm introverted, I also feed off the energy that other people have.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being at home, like I said, we have a 6-year-old at my house. And so she has to get school done. So a lot of times she's got to be in a separate space because that kid is like out of 100 on a scale of 1 to 10 at any given time. So I do have to be isolated from her. And the other one that I feed off of is a 30-pound golden doodle who will literally throw up into my lap and sit there and be like, are you going to pet me? You don't want to work today. You want to pet me today. So I don't have anybody to like feed off of in the way I would my coworkers. And it hit me like, I would say yes. The end of yesterday, I was kind of sitting there and I was like, oh, I miss those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But it's interesting that, pre-COVID, if you were doing a Zoom call, because Zoom did exist before then, right? But if, before though, if the dog crawled up on your lap or the kid was running around or, something was happening, it would be, oh, oh my Lord, like, I can't believe they made such a mistake. And now it's become actually quite common. But I think that, the piece of that too is to take it with a sense of humor and have some fun with this, because I think everybody is so serious and everybody is just so on. And I think to have those moments where we can break it up and have some fun, and talk about the team piece, whatnot. And there's the organizations that I work with where they're having cocktail parties, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe a little bit early, but but 4:30, right? And they're shutting down and like, hey, we're switching gears and we're having a cocktail party, right? And have those fun moments with it too, because I think it's become so serious, and it's become so demanding that we need to give ourselves that break, and we need to also have some fun.
Yeah, because our home now is our office sometimes, and the kids' office and everything else. So it can be a bit stressful at home too. So having your work buddies actually be your least stressful part of your day might be kind of nice. I mean, we were
Well,
arguing about putting up Christmas lights this year, so we've been around each other too much at my house.
yes, exactly. You know, but so you were saying earlier that you're an introvert, and so which is a different aspect of the mind than the work that I do. But they're combined. So you're an introvert, so you can be at home. I'm a complete extrovert. I need human beings. I need to be around people, and so which makes it really difficult, especially if you're around the same people all the time around the house. So but that's where I think sometimes, is just having, whether it's going to be in Zoom or something. Yes, we're not in person, but at least you're still getting that human interaction, and you can, have somebody tell some jokes, or have cocktail parties, or just do something different, or I guess I found out you can do a watch party, I guess, with Netflix or something. So those other team interactions, I think, are vitally important to help in the success of the team. And the one other thing I was going to mention to you is just, for your listeners too, when you think about team, what would your image of a team be?
That's a great question. um, I guess I'm going to answer just because I'm right here, and our listeners will hear this later. But for me, team came back to I've had a couple different instances where I've been on a team, right? And I did track for 5 years a while ago, and we were a team. But then, like, usually you operated on smaller groups, or you were very independently, like, goal driven. I tried out for volleyball once, and I was like, all these girls were like coming together, congratulating each other, pats on the back type thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty cool. And then I actually got to a point in college where I joined an academic fraternity, and I spent 3 years with the quirkiest, coolest people I've ever met in my entire life. And we became so close that we like referred to ourselves as a family. And so my definition of team eventually evolved to fit, we had, when I left, about 100 people. But did I know most of them? Yes. And ultimately, like, that was like the kind of team environment I wanted to be part of. Because we did group into smaller things. We broke up for committees and stuff. It was sales and management, so very typical of what you actually might see in the certain teams in your work environment. And the way we could play off of each other, like professionally, we could meet each other, brainstorm. Like, round tables were such a part of what we did locally and nationally. And then we could break at the end of the day, go have drinks at a bar. I mean, we had our names on, we still have our name on a break at a bar locally, because that's where we met after meeting. Every Tuesday night is you have a meeting, you get things done, you chat, but then everybody who's legal will go head over there and have drinks and play pool and darts and whatever else. And you get really close to those kind of people. So that for me started to embody what I want in a team, is somebody that you can both work super hard and grind with, but at the end of the day, it's also those people you can relax with, I think.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. And so we all have this idea of team being everyone's together and everyone's collaborating. And I think that no one would disagree with that. But you also, sometimes you need to frame it in a way when it comes to teamwork, is are we a volleyball team where everyone is relying on everyone else to perform as a team, right? Or are we a swim team where everyone's individual, and then we bring them, but individual action brings to the whole as the team, right? If you look at baseball, right, there's the defense on baseball, everybody's relying on one another, but the offense, you're it. right? And so sometimes when it comes to teamwork, it's sometimes just to stop and reference what kind of team are we? Because one's
Hmm.
not wrong and one's not right, but they're different, but it changes your thinking. So sometimes even now with teamwork, you can look at and say, hey, well, are we going to be, are we going to be the offense on the football team? Or are we a swim team right now? Are we a bowling team right now? What are we? Which can change your thinking as to, instead of, hey, we all have to collaborate all at the same time, well, maybe not. Maybe we need to break off, right? And we're going to do our own thing. We're going to be our little swim team, right? And then we're going to come back and then we're going to be part of the bigger group after. And I think that shifting in thinking also helps, because everyone. If you're an individual, let's use the bowling team as an example, right? Each person brings something to the table. They bring something individual and unique and different. And so in my metaphor, the whole duck, duck, goose, right, but it's talking about, it's you're the odd duck, you're the miss, but you're it. It's what you bring to the table. It's your talent. And so you know what that is, utilize it, but then you bring that forward, right? And then the next person is bowling also, then they have their talent, and the next person, but then but when you pull it all back together again, you become a team. So again, it was just going back to that shifting and thinking of what kind of team are we, instead of always thinking that we always have to collaborate and be the big group.
Hmm. I guess I've never thought about it that way, but I'm from a marketing team now and I've worked with our sales team a lot. And typically you start to see more of that, like almost swim team mindset where everybody's got their projects and their things, they're in their lane swimming. But at the end of the day, it's the team that goes forward together.
Mhm.
So, and that might be a good conversation for us to sit down and have, or for any team to sit down as like, what kind of team actually are we? How do we work around those to start having those conversations out loud versus just trying to, you know, do it until you get it type of thing.
Right. And so back, in the days now, we were talking earlier about, being on Zoom, and we're thinking, well, we all have to collaborate, and we all have to have the big Zoom calls. And I mean, which are great. Don't get me wrong. They're all good. Right. But I think you still need to come back and really look at it and say, yeah, what kind of team are we, and have those conversations. Right. Because it does change a little bit of the dialogue, and it does also provide some individuality where people are bringing, I always think when you bring your talent to the table, it's not about ego, it's not about pride, right? This is what you bring, and this is what you're offering to the group. And have other people not let's say validate, but appreciate it and respect it, right? And that's how you really start to move together as a whole. So again, as wouldn't it be, as it was a baseball team on offense, when you're up to bat, right? You want everybody behind you rooting for you, that you're going to hit one over the wall, but you're on your own, right? There's no one there to help you. You're it, right? But you know that you have all those people behind you. So again, sort of sometimes just reshape this or rethink this of what are you, and then you can change the dialogue around it.
I like that. I think it puts it into really good perspective too. As those of us who are shifting back and forth from remote or are totally remote or not. I mean, you could be in the office right now. Most of these problems, whether you add the distance and Zoom to it or not, getting to work as a team, that could be the root problem. If a team's working really well and they came into the situation with a strong head, they're probably doing a lot better right now than a team that already had their own issues going into a remote situation.
Absolutely.
So with that, I guess I'm very curious for somebody who's joining a team as a new person. I know we're seeing a lot more employment shifts right now due to just high unemployment and the fact that businesses are starting to actually have to reevaluate their structures and what they can realistically do. So if you're joining a new team and things like that, how do you go about getting to know the team and figuring out how you bring your own assets and strength to it, so that you get to that point where you're starting to work cohesively, but everybody's playing up their opportunity, so to speak.
Mhm. Well, in my world, when we started this conversation, let's talk about Kolbe. So Kolbe is the tool. That's a tool that I use. Again, measuring the conative aspect of the mind. So we want to know, number one, when you use the tool, it's a great way to, number one, understand yourself, and then first of all, and then what do you bring to the team? So just as an example, like I'm working with a organization out of Cincinnati, Ohio, as a matter of fact, so down in the U.S., right? But they're looking for an HR director. And so what we do is we're really looking at the job, number one. So we're measuring the job. But it's not about the person. It's about what are the expectations of that position, right? Let's look at that first, and then we have and then you shortlist your candidates, and then you can actually measure that, and then align the individual back to the expectations of the position itself. So we're going to help them set them up for success rather than have them set up for failure, thinking, because they may have lots of experience, and they may have be wildly educated, and they may be a really good human being, but the fact is, if they're not conatively aligned to what the expectations of the job are, we're going to see a lot of stress and strain. Usually in the beginning, it's wonderful and it's great because we all get along, and then it's fun, and I'm learning new things, I'm learning those people. But 6 months down the road, it's like, oh, why did this go south? So sort of, I'm kind of taking a roundabout way to answer your question. Is number one, I think it's really important though to understand, number one, what is it that you bring to the table, and what are those gifts and talents that you naturally provide, and then from there, when you come into the team, it's where do you fit? What box do you fill? Right. And so then when I know that, for myself, I bring a ton of, creativity and ideas, and sort of, I like to throw glitter on stuff. That's just kind of my thing. Right. But that's what I bring. And so then when other people understand that about me, it's like, hey, okay, I know that's what you're actually bringing to our team or to our organization. Then we can actually sort of, now we're the people that are rooting for you in the back. So so when you start to know these pieces, it does change the dialogue, when you're coming into the team, because you're being embraced for who you are, not just what you do.
All right. I was very curious, but that sounds, I mean, it makes sense. It's always kind of like, okay, when I have to do it type of thing. But it would make you feel a lot more secure about your position and your place in that team. I know that's a huge thing is I moved from HR to marketing here.
Hmm.
And shortly after, I think that's when you and I met because I was looking at starting the podcast at that time. And one of the first things I did is starting to just get to know my team because after the research on the podcast, so I could come at my team and be like, hey, you have an idea for me. Here's what I could actually be doing type of thing. Because at first it was just like, can you start podcast? So we started shaping. I actually got to help shape my job description, but then it was getting to know my team and who does what. We've got a voice actor who does a lot of our animated videos, and now we've brought on a videographer. And we have a marketing specialist who helps with a couple different things like newsletters, emails, social media, and things like that. And then we my boss who ties all the loose ends and oversees like the major marketing efforts. And then, of course, me. So it's very interesting because I think marketing is very niche as far as your team. Everybody definitely has your particular specialties, so to speak. I would be interested to see it with a team like sales, where you might all actually be selling the same products or similar products with similar job descriptions. So, um, what are I guess my next question, kind of leading into it, is what are some good ways after you kind of know yourself and you know what perspective you're coming at? What are some good ways to go about getting to know your team and knowing your fit within that team?
Well, this is a bit of a biased answer. But number one, I will say, and again, it's knowing. I'm not. This isn't a sales pitch, but it's about knowing somebody's Kolbe. So you brought up a really good point when we were talking earlier, and you were saying you have a friend of yours who was is a teacher, and she likes to have everything like organized. It's got to have structure. Like I got to know what's going to happen next, and I got to put things in order, and right, everything is very, very sequential.
Mhm.
When I know, so then, if I was working with something like that, right, I want to know that about that person, because number one, how they're going to communicate with me is they're going to, and this will be kind of funny because you'll hear it from your friend, and she'll say, okay, what's the plan? Right. And so it'll be okay. Why? Because she needs to have everything in order. So here's the interesting thing. I always like to take and turn kind of procrastination on its head. So we'll use your teacher friend as an example of that. If they don't see a start, a middle, and an end, they won't start. It looks like procrastination, but it's not procrastination. It's, I don't see a start, a middle, and end. Why would I start? So now, if I don't understand that about that person, I'd be like, well, what are they waiting for? Why just let's get going. Let's go. Right. And so your intention is really good to get them moving and motivated, but you're actually causing, well, harm. You're
Mhm.
because all you're doing is you're pushing them back up against themselves, and they're like, well, I haven't got this figured out. I haven't got this figured out. Well, what do you mean I haven't got it figured out? Come on, let's just, why can't you just wing it? Right. And so, and because they never will. It's just not, that's not who they are as a person. So again, when I say about, talk about how do you know those people on your team, I want to know that about that person. Right. There's other people who, they're called, the fact finders, who they want to have their research, they want to have the data, they want to know, they want to be right, they want to know why. If they don't have enough information to move forward, they won't move forward. Right. And they look like they're dragging their feet, and you say, well, come on, let's get on with this. Yeah, but just wait. Okay, I just want to find a little more research. Right. I want to know that about that person, because then I know it's not about motivation. It's about helping them leverage what they need. Instincts are needs, not wants. So they need more information, or they need more data. Okay, well, how can I help you get what you need? And then we'll come in that together. Right. Um, and then you have the talk about the salespeople, us quick starts, right? Who will like just talk over top of each other, and right, and it's all about fun, and we got a million different ideas, and the funny thing is about us, and talk about this instinctual aspect of us, is that we think out loud, we think outside of our heads. So if you have a boss or a direct report or something, and they're coming up with all these ideas, right, and what they're doing is they're thinking outside of their head, and then what happens is other people say, well, but you said, oh, well, I didn't mean that. What I meant was, right. And because that's how they're problem solving. So they're coming up with all the ideas, and they're thinking outside of their heads. They're not actually saying they're going to do it. They're just thinking about it, and they're brainstorming outside of their minds, right? And then other people say, well, what are you doing? I want to know that. I want to know that about that person, because it sure helps me communicate. Um, we talked about the long fact finders earlier, who they use the past. They'll always use the past as their sense of time. So they'll go back. Okay, what have we done before? What's the history? What's been done? Do we have the budget? They're going to look backwards. Where this talk about the long quick starts, they move. They're always about the future. They're like, what are we going to do next? Where are we going to go? What's going to happen? Hey, I got this idea. We can go here. We can go there. They're moving actually in two different directions. Right. And again, it's not, when we look at sometimes with the struggles in a team, or struggles of people working together, it can look like a personality conflict. A lot of time it's not a personality conflict, it's a connotative conflict, because you're coming at the problem from a different perspective, and it has nothing to do with emotion, it has nothing to do with personality. It's just that's how you're approaching the problem. And so it's not a power struggle. It's like, well, this is my way of problem. This is, well, why can't you just come along with me then? Well, because I need this. No, you don't need that. Right. And this is where we start to have the conflicts, or I can't, they just always fill in the blank. Right. I was working with an organization here just recently, and one of the girls, and there was one of the modes, again, going back in this whole Kolbe piece, but it's really important to know that she is what we call a long implementer. An implementer is how we deal with space intangibles. And so for her, that she lives in the tangible world. She needs to see it to believe it. She has to touch it and feel it and be in the space of it, right? So she would have been called a tomboy growing up. So had nothing to do with being a tomboy at all. It had everything to do with being a female who who actually lives and problem solves in the tangible world, right? And so for her, not be able to see things or not be able to touch things, she wants to be able to try to demonstrate, what the point she's trying to get across. That's her way of communicating, right? So now in the Zoom world, it's very difficult because you can't get the body language, you can't feel the energy, you can't see those, well, try doing it with masks on, it's even worse. um but for her, I said, like, have your screen on a whiteboard, draw stuff out, make it into something, or do a demonstration of the point you're trying to get across, because that's her way of trying to solve the problem and trying to communicate. And when you're talking, so sometimes when you have people coming at it from a different perspective, you have two ships passing in the night. I want to know what that is. I want to know what those people bring to the table, because then I'm armed with information, right? That I can say, okay, now I know. So, Haley, I know what you bring to the table, right? I can actually ask for that because I know that's what you'll do. And then, number one, I'm getting what I need because because we're trying to solve the problem. And number two, I'm giving you the opportunity to give of yourself. And why wouldn't you, when it becomes, that's a natural thing that you do.
Mhm. It's kind of it's fun to hear you describe like these different types of people, because as you're doing it, I'm like, oh yeah, like thinking of types of people I know that fit each of those bills. And especially on my team, knowing how different people think. It's like you said, my friend, she has to have a plan. We all put 5 girls in tent in Tennessee for an entire weekend, and she was the one like, we need to plan, we need to have the schedule and blah blah, know what we're gonna do. And we had a giant Google Doc or a Google sheet that had everything listed out. And I was sitting there like, I can make it pretty.
You can do a
uh,
glitter on it.
I will tell people I don't like Google Sheets and do Google Docs because you can't make them as pretty as you can like an Excel sheet, even though share wise it's just more functional. So I was like, if it doesn't look pretty, I can promise you I won't be in this doc. Now, if it looks pretty, I will be the only one updating this doc, but it has to look pretty first. Um, so it's very interesting as you're talking about that. And then I was always like the tomboy growing up too, and I'm very hands-on like that, like physically being able to mess and touch with stuff. Like failed cell bio, did really great at cell bio lab, hands down. I mean, I'm a pro at sneaking on snacks too, but it's besides the point. But no, I hands-on wise, like I could learn cell bio. Try to teach it to me in concept, no. So
Exactly. So my history, I have a history back in, I'm a massage therapist, and I do what's called myofascial release. So that's another part of my backstory. But anyway, I failed physics in high school. And to the point I tried to drop it, he wouldn't let me drop it. And so I got 25%. And I walked away. I said, I don't get it. This makes no sense. And then he was trying to teach it to me from a textbook, and I just couldn't grasp it. It had nothing, I'll have to say this, I thought myself as reasonably smart. Sure wasn't the top of the class, but it had nothing to do with intelligence. It had everything to do with how I was trying to learn it. So I went from failing physics in high school because it made no sense to me. And yet when I got into massage therapy college, I graduated top of my class, and human physics was as easy as pie, right? It's like, well, this is easy, right? It's the physics or physics or physics,
mhm.
right? But it was my way of trying to learn, and my way, and another way of being taught, right? So one was theoretical textbook, one was physical, three-dimensional, and for me, that's what I needed in order to actually understand and problem solve and move forward and be successful. So, and that's the same thing that happens in the work environment. It's no different, I love working with kids because, as adults, we have a choice. We can quit. Kids can't, right?
Have you
Kids
met my
aren't.
sister?
Right. So again, but if you understand that piece of how they're problem solving, how they're trying to figure out the world, right, then let them do it their way versus the way that that I would do it. And because my way not may work for them. We could be complete opposites. And and again, it's no different than on a team, right? When you say, well, so you have the boss or the CEO or the director, whoever it is, right, is saying, okay, we gotta stick to this, we gotta stick to the plan, we gotta, and everything's rigid and there's no room for movement. The people around them are like, well, you're strangling me, right? Yeah, and it's the fact it's not intentional, right?
Mm.
It's with good intention. It's not without effort. It's good effort, but the fact is you're not giving the people to be that to have the freedom to be themselves and doing problem solving their way. As long as we, in my world, I call it the golden pond, right? So in my metaphor, right, if we all know what the golden pond is, right? We sometimes we're heading for for the lake, but we ended up in the field, or and there's storms and there's hunters and there's all sorts of things that play out but the fact is, as long as we know where we're going, does it really matter how we get there? As long as we know where we're going. And so in my analogy with when geese fly in a V, they fly in a V for a reason, right? If you watch nature will teach you a lot about business. And so geese fly in a V because each one helps the one behind it. It actually helps the draft or the wind, right? So then the thing is that the lead goose never stays the lead goose. They're always changing. They're always revolving because you can't be at the front all the time. You will burn out. It just doesn't work. So there's times in the marketing say, well, okay, that here, Haley, why don't you take the podcast? You're the lead goose and do things that you shine at, that you do really well at. And then you can, when it comes to, okay, well, now we got to produce it and we got to do the editing and we got to do all whatever else, right? Then you step back in the flock and let somebody else be the lead goose. Right.
Oh yeah, my hands are up for that part.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. But there's your teamwork, right? And it's
Mhm.
handing off and it's saying thank you. And it's handing off and being, oh, I really respect you for what you bring to the table. And I really appreciate what you have to offer. Right. And I'm gonna let you I'm gonna let you take it. And that whole pyramid thing you're talking about earlier, I mean, the V does look like a pyramid, but the fact is that as it's all revolving, it does actually kind of flatten out where everybody's doing their part, but everybody is also bringing their natural talent to the table to get there. And again, you can't make it right or wrong, good or bad. It just is. So that each team member has something to contribute, but it's just knowing what that is, and then how do we leverage that?
Mhm. I love your physics class example. I had a physics class. Well, I had one freshman year and I had one senior year, and the freshman was like the intro freshman science type thing. In freshman year, I was sitting in that class. I came to him in tears because I didn't know what I was doing, and he looked at me, Haley, what are you talking about? You're the highest person in my like top performer in all my classes. And I was like, I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. And I think it was like, it might have been regular. I played a few games because I wanted to go on the physics trip, and only we have a partner school. So I transferred for that class so I could go on the physics trip because our school didn't. Um, Typically happened during a track meet, and our teacher was also a coach. So he was like, nope, no trip. Um, but I remember I was this crazy, disorganized, hyperactive student. I would get up to go to the restroom and disappear for 30 minutes and come back.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell I clearly wasn't doing anything I should, but I always had answers for all of the questions. I knew exactly what was going on. I participated, even if I was sneaking food into the labs. I was chaotic, but I was on top of it, and that worked for me. And the teacher at first was like, Haley, you got to stop. And I was like, I just got the strength from the lunch line. Um, my other friend, on the other hand, who I was loved the class with, she needs to have like the extra little bit of structure. She gets completely off. Like she'd be struggling and she was good at it because she wasn't focused. So he always knew like he'd have to keep her in the line. And then like whatever I did, as long as I always came back and was on top of things and didn't miss stuff, it was fine. He did really good. And when you're like kind of guiding that curve and you're coming at it like that, knowing who you're working with and how they work well is so big. It made such a difference to how we performed in that class versus freshman year, where it was like he just threw it at us and I was like, and I mean, I still did well. I learned nothing. I was like, I retained nothing from that class.
Mm-hmm.
And I came away like in tears. And I remember I had to walk home because I had to stay late for the final. And it took me so long. I had to walk home because I missed my bus. And he told me, he's like, you got to finish it. And it took me an hour to walk home, and I cried the entire time.
But I wanted to think about that though, is when you think about how you didn't understand it, and you say, well, so when I say, well, but you're the smartest kid in the class, you're
Mhm.
the you're exceptional, why can't you get it? So if you think about the story that you might tell yourself in your mind, right, maybe like it really would hit on your self-confidence and your self-esteem, and think, well, maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. And
Mhm.
you start to tell yourself a story, but the story isn't true. And that's the funny thing about it. And so it had nothing at all to do with your intelligence.
Yeah.
It,
I thought I was doing so bad, and I set the curve for all of those tests and stuff like that. I
yeah,
still left that class in tears.
right. So, if I was to say to you, Haley, you have to sit in your desk and toe the line and stick with it, and stick until it's done. Don't move. Just, I mean,
Mhm.
now, so what I've done, right? So really, you're not the problem. I'm the problem. Because I've put you in a situation where you're not going to function as yourself and problem solve your way, because I think that's the best way, right?
Mhm.
And then blame you for not performing. And it's no different than in business. It's no different than being on a team. So I put you in a spot and say, go, just know, get this done, and sit there, and don't leave your desk until it's complete. I become the problem. But if I say, so it's so funny, because so I was saying to you earlier, I changed my office and I made it into a coffee shop, and I have my coffee makers, but I have my guitar here too, right? So when I get stuck on a problem, either I'll pace and I'll walk, or I'll play guitar, right? And which seems like I'm not working, but I really am, because what I'm doing is I'm putting my mind in a different direction, right? And I'm recharging my batteries so I can come back at the problem again and go again, right? And so instead of trying to sit there and try to push through, it just doesn't work. When I talk about the instinctive aspect of the mind, it's mental energy, and when your battery's dead, your battery's dead. So good thing God gave us rechargeable batteries, right? But you need to recharge it. You need to do something else. You need to recharge it and do it your way. So I'll pace or walk or play guitar or whatever, and then I can come back to the problem, and then I can go again. You did the same thing by going to the lunchroom and getting snacks and doing all those things, right? That was, so you were fighting for the freedom to be yourself.
Mhm.
You just didn't know why you were doing it.
I'm a very chaotic student, but I love being a student.
Right.
So, when I had teachers that embraced the fact that I was not going to be the perfect student, I usually did well in their class, especially if the work was harder. If I had no problem with the work like math, I would stop doing the homework because I was like, I know it, what's the
Yeah.
point? I know it. But um, it's the same with your team members. There are things that trigger their creative juices and relieve stress are going to be totally different than mine or the bosses or whoever the team lead happens to be. So
Absolutely. So what stresses you, right, may be the thing that the other person actually thrives in.
mhm,
If you don't understand, it's like, well, I don't understand you. Like, I don't get it. Like, why would that stress you out so much, right? Well, it just does. And I want to point this out too, which is really fascinating, is when you get down to neuroscience, is that this is coming from the subconscious part of your mind. And the interesting thing, the subconscious part of your mind, there's no words. Your subconscious mind thinks in pictures and feelings. There's no words. So you can't express it. So when you say, well, why do you do that? Well, I, well,
I
just,
do.
just cause.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but why? Like, I need you to tell me why. Well, because there's no words there for it.
Mhm.
And so you can't express. So again, on the team side, well, why be so for your teacher friend, well, why can't you just wing it? Like, why can't you just what do you mean Google? You don't need no Google Docs, and we don't need the Excel, we don't need the plan. Let's just go have fun, right? And she's freaking out. So, well, what are you freaking out about, right? Well, but I need a no, you don't need a plan, right? And so she'll try to express it, but there's no words to express it. And so it's a feeling, then usually that's when emotion comes out. So on a team, when you start to see the emotions start to come out, right, it's the only way for that person to try to express themselves for something that they have no words for.
Mhm. All right. All right. Well, I think this is a fantastic place to wrap it up because we've gone a little bit longer than I intended. But the topic of our teams and how we work together is so vital and important, especially right now, that I'm glad we touched on everything we did. So I want to thank you again for coming on to our show. I want to remind everybody that he does have a fantastic ebook that just came out. So we'll link that, of course, in our bios and our blog post that you can go ahead and find that yourself. And then for now, thank you for tuning in to Everyday Business Solutions and have a great rest of your week.